Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. The verdict on the second worst carnage which happened in the 2002 Gujarat riots at Gulbarg Society has been pronounced. Out of the 66 who had been accused, 36 have been acquitted and 24 convicted, out of whom 11 are for more serious charges including murder. The acquitted includes a BJP corporator, an ex-Congress corporator, and the Inspector of Police who had initially registered the case and done investigations, against whom local people had made charges. 69 people had been burnt alive and massacred by a Hindu mob, including former Congress MP Ehsan Jafri in the Gulbarg Society complex on February 28, 2002. This case, which has taken 14 years for the verdict to come, had gone through a tortuous process which saw the Supreme Court appointing a SIT to investigate the case, along with other serious cases like Naroda Patia, Naroda Gam, Best Bakery, among others. Yesterday's verdict is significant in more than one way, especially as it does not uphold charges of conspiracy against any of the convicted. What does this verdict mean legally as well as politically, apart from what it means to the victims? How will this verdict fit into the larger issue of the Gujarat riots and the attempt to bring justice to the thousands of victims? We will look at all this today with Mansukh N. Mandavia, who will be on the phone line very shortly with us, Professor Pushpesh Pant, a political analyst, and Ashish Ketan, leader of the Aam Aadmi Party, who has been in his earlier avatar as a journalist, done some significant work on the Gujarat riots, on the phone line with us from Chandigarh, and Siddharth Varadarajan, founding editor of the Wire.in, who has also done a book on Gujarat riots. Welcome to all of you. Professor Pant, you think this judgment will bring some kind of a closure to the victims?
No, I don't think so. I think it's going to leave the victims very unhappy, because I think the major grouse would be that without treading into the delicate area of committing contempt of court, I mean, ultimately, first of all, this judgment is pronounced by the lowest court. There is an appeal due in higher courts all the way. I think if you come to the conclusion after all these 14 years that there was no conspiracy, so the judge in his or her infinite wisdom has decided there was no conspiracy. But it's difficult to swallow that without a conspiracy, a carnage of this magnitude could have taken place. And it's not only the conspiracy, then it's the complicity of the state administration at that stage. And as the list of acquitted people includes a congressman and a BJP man, so obviously it went beyond party divide.
And also an inspector of police.
Inspector of police. So that is enough to indicate that it was basically a communal thing. And I, for one, at least find it very difficult to believe that this thing was a spontaneous swell of anger targeting few people within their residential complex. 69 people
were killed.
So you almost have a ratio of 1:1. 66 accused and 69 killed. And if you have the acquittals, I mean, it's not only this case. I think in the Gujarat riots case, there always has been this residual discomfort in the mind of people, even in distant places away from Gujarat, that justice has not been done. Neither the investigation was done properly. Is much to my regret, one has to admit that even the Supreme Court monitored SIT probably did not function smoothly all the time. And unfortunately, the SIT person also says that this has only been, the judgment has only brought them partial satisfaction, not entire.
That's interesting. We are now joined in by Sanjay Hegde, a senior advocate in the Supreme Court. Sanjay, how do you see this? The significant part of this judgment is that there is no conspiracy. That seems to be the underlying feature of this judgment. Would you agree?
Well, ultimately, what does a judge do? The judge has to go by the evidence which is laid on the record. The evidence also doesn't come from out thin air or from news reports or from public perceptions. Evidence is what the witness states in court, and that is based upon the investigation that has gone on further. Now, you see, in individual cases where 3 people get together and decide that somebody else has to be knocked off, then it is sometimes easier to prove a conspiracy. Now, here, it is not as if the perpetrators and the victims knew each other.
Some of them,
there is a
some of them
geographic-
knew each
Yeah,
other
no, no,
because,
there
some
is
of the
a-
victims have named the
Yes,
some of the accused.
the victims know them as neighbors, as people whom they have seen on a day-to-day basis. But what is targeted in cases of communal violence is entire areas. So Gulbarg Society got targeted that day. Now, was there a specific conspiracy where X or Y said, go ahead and knock off everybody there in Gulbarg? That kind of conspiracy, was there material led? Was there any evidence of prior meeting of minds? That you have to assess based on what was actually led. It may just be that the investigating agency sometimes also tends to overcook the evidence, put in too much, and in criminal law, where it is proof beyond reasonable doubt, then when there is when there are too many statements, some tend to contradict each other, and then when you are assessing the roles of the accused, the benefits of doubt also have to be given. So it may be that when you look at it as a stand-alone incident, the conspiracy may not have been proven based on the material which was led.
And the courts have to look at these issues as standalone cases.
Ultimately, that's the process. That's the legal process in court.
Ashish, how do you look at this judgment? I think Ashish is disconnected. We'll go back to him. Siddharth, what Sanjay says has carries a lot of weight. Now, there is some amount of disappointment in various circles about the fact that, the courts have not found the conspiracy at all. But Sanjay's explanation of how and why, how it can be found is, how do you look at it?
I agree with Sanjay ji that the conspiracy part is, I think it's one aspect of the judgment. It's not an aspect that worries me particularly because, the prospects for delivering justice were compromised from the word go. Your viewers need to bear in mind, they need to remember, or somebody needs to remind them that the incident happens on February 28, 2002. You have a very, very tendentious charge sheet filed by the Gujarat police soon after, which is at complete variance with the first information report that the victims of the massacre filed with the police. Rahul Sharma, who was a highly credible Gujarat IPS officer who was in Bhavnagar during the violence and who saved many Muslims and was later transferred to the DCP control room in Ahmedabad, reviewed some of this evidence, and when he pointed out to his superiors that the way the police was investigating the Gulbarg case was all wrong, he was promptly transferred out of there. It became very clear from day one whether or not there was a conspiracy to organize the violence. It was clear that there was a conspiracy to cover up the truth. The Gujarat police, the Gujarat government showed no interest whatsoever in punishing the guilty. So much so that in 2003, when the National Human Rights Commission, and remember we're talking about the Vajpayee government, when the NHRC approaches the Supreme Court in the aftermath of the Best Bakery acquittal to say that we don't have faith in the Gujarat government's ability and the Gujarat police's willingness to prosecute these cases, the Supreme Court put a stay, and it finally appointed a special investigations team in 2008, which was tasked with reinvestigating these cases. So what we have seen yesterday is a series of convictions emerging from a trial that happened more than a decade after the incident itself took place, during which all kinds of clues, all kinds of evidence would have dissipated, would have corroded, would have not been available to an honest prosecution, even if that was what the state wanted to mount. So under these circumstances, that you have even 11 people convicted of murder, I think is a good thing. It's a positive step. Of course, it's hard to believe that 11 people by themselves could have massacred 69 innocent people and laid the entire Gulbarg housing society to such utter waste and devastation. So clearly there were a lot more people who were involved. I don't think the victims are going to feel overly satisfied with this verdict. I think that they will want to go on appeal, at least to ensure that those who were charged with the crime end up getting convicted by the higher courts. But the fact is that, the original sin of the Gujarat government was to allow the killings to take place, but it compounded that sin with willful neglect as far as gathering evidence, as far as identifying the perpetrators, and as far as pushing for justice was concerned. And we are today paying the price for that.
Professor Pant, is that the way you look at it? Or, you think that in these kind of cases, we have to look at each case isolated in isolated way, which some people would like to look at. They look at it in isolated way, and nothing has come out of it.
No, I'm afraid, Girish, I can't subscribe to that view at all. I entirely agree with what Sanjay ji says here, that the courts have to follow the laid down judicial process. They have to go by the evidence which is put on record and pronounce a judgment. But as far as the people's view of the majesty of law, the credibility of the rule of law is concerned, there are things which go beyond the courtroom. That's where you say no isolated case. Even in the Gujarat post-Godhra riots, this is one of the 3 or 4 major carnage cases.
This is the second largest.
And this may be the second largest, there must be a larger than this case, there is a next largest. But the point remains that in all 4 cases, as Siddharth says, there seems to be a conspiracy to cover up. And this gives rise to a suspicion that this is not an isolated case, but there is a pattern, there is a method in this communal madness. So what do we do about that? So I think it's fine to say that at least some people, despite the flawed process, flawed investigation, have got convicted. But doesn't it leave all of us badly maimed and the judicial system pretty sadly eroded of its credibility? I mean, if the criminal investigation system is dependent on a state police machinery which is partisan, come to a more recent example, the Jat riots in reservation-related riots in Haryana, and Prakash Singh's report which we discussed the other day. I mean, is this, you have another kind of a thing which has happened in Mathura yesterday. SP shot dead, and doubtless there will be another inquiry. It will be years before anything else takes place, and there will be another cover-up. So it is not only the Gujarat cover-up. Every time there is a carnage, a communal carnage, or there is a breakdown of law and order of this scale, there seems to be a systematic conspiracy on the part of the state, the government in power, regardless of which. 1984 anti-Sikh riots, has it been brought to a closure?
Sanjay, when we talk of cover-up and things like that, but this is not what the judiciary is going to be concerned about.
See, if the judiciary stretches out its hand beyond the case, then it is accused of overreach.
Sorry. Let me finish the question. So in this case, there was a certain amount of overstretching of the judiciary. Supreme Court, Supreme Court, in fact, cancelled all the investigation, then set up a new SIT, monitored all the investigations.
Yes. See,
they
the
went out of the way.
riots are a compendious term. There were separate incidents. There was an incident in Naroda Patia. There was the incident in Gulbarg Society. There was the incident in Best Bakery. Each of them became a separate case. Now, each of those cases, they ultimately, whatever the investigation revealed, whatever material, whatever witnesses the investigating team brought to court, filed a charge sheet. Against those perpetrators, a trial took place. Now, there was also this question of whether there was an overarching conspiracy to create all these incidents. That kind of case.
Create and cover up.
Cover up is after the fact.
That
is of weakening the proceedings in court, getting people out on bail, getting witnesses to change their mind. That's a separate part of it. But for the actual perpetration of those incidents of February 2002, was there an overall pattern? For that, there hasn't been any specific case which has finally been brought to court. Because you will recollect that as far as the then Chief Minister was concerned, even he was investigated. Now, the investigating team then found that there wasn't enough material on the basis of which they could say that there was a case to be tried. The Supreme Court looked at that also. then it appointed an amicus curiae to look at the investigating material. He gave an alternate report. And then the Supreme Court said, look, we've brought it up to this stage. We cannot try it. The Supreme Court could not have tried it. Because after all, there have to be appeals and the entire process.
And the SIT looked at it.
So therefore, they sent it back to the magistrate. And the magistrate then agreed with the SIT. That matter is up in appeal in the High Court. Now, you see, the point is that ultimately what happens finally when a court delivers a verdict is that the court can only go by material which is brought on record through a legal process known to it in that courtroom.
Okay.
The cases like have always been weakened, and it's not necessarily only riot cases. Well, you have seen that even huge corruption cases have failed. There is a systemic flaw.
Siddharth, when we are talking of what Sanjay is saying, is there a problem? Do you have a problem with the investigations? SIT, Supreme Court monitored it. After all that, it has come to this stage. Okay, the SIT chief himself is saying that we are not fully satisfied, we are partly satisfied. What does it mean?
Look, there are two parts to the SIT's work. The SIT was tasked with reinvestigating 14 of the most heinous massacres that happened between 27th of February and sometime the first week of March 2002. That included the Godhra train attack, that included Best Bakery, that included the Gulbarg Society, Naroda Party, and so on. And it's based on that investigation and that marshalling of evidence that the convictions which we have seen yesterday were delivered. So to that extent, one cannot fault the SIT's criminal investigation in the Gulbarg Society or Naroda Patia case. After all, in Naroda Patia, they managed to secure the conviction of a sitting minister,
right.
Maya Kodnani, who was serving in the Narendra Modi government at the time that she was arrested. And in this particular case, they haven't managed to secure the convictions of senior political personalities or even the Inspector Erda, KG Erda. But 11 people have been convicted, and we'll have to review the judgment to see on what grounds the court didn't accept the SIT's claims. Where the SIT has, I think, not done a good job is in the petition that Zakia Jafri filed, where she had alleged that there was a wider conspiracy involving 50, 60 people, right from the then Chief Minister Narendra Modi down to various police officers. And she essentially wanted a case registered so that they could be held accountable and subjected to cross-examination in a court of law. So there the SIT actually had one lengthy session with Mr. Modi where they put a number of questions to him. And it's very interesting when you read the transcript of the SIT's interrogation of Mr. Modi, they put various questions to him. For example, one of the questions put was, when did you find out that the mob had gathered outside Gulbarg Society and that violence was going on, and who told you about it, and what steps did you take to help the victims? And Mr. Modi tells the SIT that I only learnt about the Gulbarg massacre late that night. Now,
And
it's very
also
hard to believe that
also
a chief minister,
Naroda Patia,
particularly a dynamic person like Mr. Modi, who is supposed to be a great administrator, finds out about a massacre which happened in the afternoon only at night.
No, but Siddharth,
but the SIT does not ask any follow-up questions.
Siddharth, but the point is that the SIT accepted that version. Then they gave a clean sheet to him, and that is over now. Now, do you think that with this judgment now, any more finger pointing at the former chief minister is going to be futile, or it's going to be unfair?
Look, see, nothing is over in the sense that there is a process of law. Zakia Jafri has filed an appeal against the SIT. Now, I cannot prejudge what will happen. It's quite likely that were Mr. Modi to be subjected to other kinds of questions, he would have plausible and credible answers. But I think Zakia Jafri wants her day in court, and she will probably appeal all the way to the Supreme Court. So I would imagine that we still are looking at 2 or 3 years of legal proceedings before this matter is finally settled one way or the other. But
okay.
this is the process that the Supreme Court itself set in motion, when it accepted her petition and when it appointed an SIT. It presupposed that the SIT would reach a certain conclusion. The trial court may accept it or not. The interested parties would appeal it, and Zakia Jafri has appealed it, and there the matter stands. We will have to wait to see what the High Court and eventually the Supreme Court decides on this matter. But it's clear that we haven't heard the last as far as the full set of facts are concerned.
Professor Pant? No, as far as the Prime Minister, I mean, the then Chief Minister, now Prime Minister is concerned, or even then Home Minister is concerned, you know, the argument being made in their favor is that, you know, this was the last thing, you know, people went against them, you know, to try to find fault, and finally now this verdict has finally given them the ultimate clean sheet.
No, I think I would agree entirely with Siddharth that this is not the last word. This can't be considered the clean sheet. This can't be considered the ultimate closure. And in the years to come, there will be a lot more heated debate on this issue. And I think even after the Supreme Court has pronounced the proverbial final word theoretically, I think people would not stop talking about whether justice was done or there was a wider conspiracy.
People, Sanjay, people keep talking and things like, but legally, what is the situation now? You know, this verdict, can people say that, you know, as far as the former Chief Minister was concerned, this is the ultimate?
No, there's nothing about the former Chief Minister because he was never on trial.
He was never on trial.
In this matter, he was not on trial.
Right.
See, the point is that each incident is taken separately.
SIT gave a clean sheet, you know, SIT.
Yes.
He was on, you know, not on trial,
No,
but he was under question.
He was investigated.
Yes.
Now that investigation did not reach a conclusion insofar as joining him in this particular incident was concerned. Now, as far as that decision is concerned, there are separate proceedings. Now, if those separate proceedings culminate in something in a day where he's finally arraigned in court, that is in God's good time, assuming that it happens. So, as far as this particular verdict is concerned, I would not see it either as in any way casting a shadow on him or or giving him an absolute blemishless clean sheet. About his role, there are some other proceedings pending. You should leave it at that. In this particular role, in this particular incident and case, the only question is, was everybody who was arraigned before the court, did they have a fair trial? Was the result of that trial, insofar as each particular individual concerned, backed by evidence, and was the right conclusion reached? That is what the appellate courts will look at.
What is it that the appellate court will look at? See, these are the things which will look at.
No, the appellate courts will look at.
Or what is it that somebody can appeal to the higher court?
No, they can appeal on the reading of the testimony. See, let me just explain to you what happens in a case of mob violence. Now, in a case of mob violence, you ultimately, in most cases, or end up checking which witness saw which perpetrator do what. And now, if that witness is corroborated by another witness, then at least you have some basis on which you can convict that person. It is also not necessary that in mob violence, for instance, that you must be responsible for the death of one individual or the other. If you were part of the mob, you are responsible for the entirety. But even to establish that you were part of the mob, there should be at least a couple of credible witnesses.
Here the interesting thing is 11 people have been convicted for murder, whereas the other 12 or 13 have been convicted for attempt to murder. How does that fit into the whole thing?
See, that is where that criminal conspiracy finding becomes relevant. Now, if the court had held that there was a conspiracy and that all these people were guilty of conspiracy, then notwithstanding the fact that somebody just stood there, did nothing, but was waiting to check whether the police were coming on time, he would still be guilty of murder. But if there was no conspiracy, then you are liable only for individual acts. So, among these 11 people, I assume the judge would have said that, look, witness PW1 and PW3 saw accused A hit deceased B. So therefore, there are two witnesses who did that.
69 people have died,
16
and 11 people are supposed to have killed those 69. Is that the rationale?
No, that's not the rationale. You can't take that rationale. You can only say that as far as 11 people are concerned, there exists credible evidence to convict them for murder. As far as about
whose murder, how is not important.
No, because there was no conspiracy which was found, and it is not based on conspiracy, I assume that individual acts, that it will be so and so by who was running, say the accused 1 hit him, accused 2 took out a sword,
so anyway,
things like that. So, that would be the kind of evidence
Siddharth,
which would lead to certain people being convicted and certain people not being convicted.
Siddharth, so as journalists, it will be interesting to look at the judgment in detail and find out what it has found.
Yeah, I think more than journalists, I think lawyers will have to really pass it carefully and decide on what are the grounds for appeal. And also, let's not forget, Girish, that those who have been convicted will also have the right to appeal and try to get themselves acquitted at the appeal stage. So I think these are still early days. I think the fact that, as I said, 11 people have itself been convicted despite the passage of 14 years is something to be welcomed. One would have hoped that a larger number of perpetrators would have been found guilty or would have even been arraigned in the first place. By all accounts, you had a mob numbering anywhere from 2,000 to 10,000-15,000 people who were there. And you had police officers who were derelict in their duty. You had politicians of one kind or the other who were inciting the mobs. It's unfortunate that all of them have not had to face the sort of justice. But this is a first start, and let's wait and see what the actual text of the judgment says before figuring out what weight an appeal might hold in the High Court.
Professor Pant, very quick last words. Does it give some kind of at least relief to the victims that something has been done?
I think the victims have spoken for themselves. They have not even greeted this as partial relief. They have gone into appeal. And I think Siddharth is adding a very good word of caution that even the convicted in the eyes of law have a chance at acquittal. So if let's assume theoretically they are acquitted, then what relief is there for the victims?
Anyway, let's wait and watch what will happen. It'll take some time for us to finally come to a closure as far as this case is concerned, but till it goes to the highest court of appeal. We'll wait and watch what happens. Thanks to all my guests. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue of the Big Picture same time on Monday. Meanwhile, have a great weekend.